Hello everybody and welcome back to the Blue Snot channel. Today I am back with the MLS Matchweek number 3 preview, and today I'm also back with another edition of Late Night MLS Preview because this is the second week in a row that I'm doing this late into the night. It is currently 11:31 right now, so yeah, fun time doing this at late night. I might as well just do this every time late at the night because why not? But yeah, so basically what happened today was I actually went out to eat for dinner and I got back around 10 o'clock and I basically wrote everything on the board and I was ready to record. Well, actually I also had to take a 10-minute shower and then I come back, just set up the board and stuff like that. And then while I was setting up the board, I accidentally put my jacket and pressed it into the board as I was trying to set it up. And basically this whole section right here got completely just got destroyed because of that. And the letter were all messed up and stuff like that, so I had to redo it. And then once I redo everything and I put the board back on, I accidentally did the same mistake by accidentally putting my jacket and putting it up right around here. And it was obviously very frustrated that I did the same thing that I did earlier, and I'm not quite sure you guys can see it, but it's kind of still has that kind of mark right around here. And at that point I just kind of like made minor adjustment and just decide not to fix it anymore because yeah, it was just, I was so frustrated about that, which also tells you that it is actually really hard to set this thing up. You know, I don't hang this on a wall. I have this on a chair with a stand that is literally made out of the clothes that I have in my closet. So yeah, it's very difficult to set it up, and I think this is probably the first time that I had so much difficulty to set up. But either way, without further ado, let's actually talk about the actual game. So there is going to be 9 games again this weekend, which means that there's going to be 5 teams that's going to have their bye week. And the 5 teams that's going to have a bye week this week is Portland, New England, the 2 LA team, and also the Colorado Rapids. Now, the thing about these 9 games, and the thing that I like and sort of don't like about these 9 games, is that all of these, or not all of these, but 5 of the 9 games that is going to be played this weekend is going to be in the daytime. It's going to be early morning. I think this is the earliest with a 10:30 kickoff my time, 1:30 Eastern. These two are 11 o'clock, and then this one I think is also 11 o'clock, and this one is like 12:30 p.m. So the good news for me is that I can definitely watch these games because if you guys don't know, I'm actually going to go to Fresno on Saturday to do a Sports Hop series, and make sure you guys check out that video when it's uploaded on Sunday. It's going to be a very good one. But yeah, I'm going to be going to Fresno, which means that I cannot really watch any of the afternoon game, which includes this one. Well, actually, this one I will listen to it on the radio, but yeah, I couldn't really watch this one or this one, and maybe only like partially the last part of the second half of this one. But you know, at least all the games are in the morning and I can watch most of them. The bad news is that I have to wake up early in the morning to watch them, and I'm not a morning person, especially on the weekend. I usually never wake up earlier than 11 a.m. on the weekend, but oh well, it is what it is. And also there's only one Sunday game this weekend, and that of course is this one that kicks off I think at 2 o'clock my time and 5 o'clock Eastern time. But yeah, let's obviously begin, and we start off with this one, DC United taking on Houston. This game is actually going to be played at Maryland Soccer Complex, and I actually didn't tell you that this is actually a home game for DC United. This is the first home game that they have this season. Obviously they're going to have to play it on a temporary venue because their new stadium, Audi Field, is not done. It won't be finished until like July and stuff like that, so they have to play like I think 3 or 4 home games in a temporary venue. And the first temporary venue they're going to be playing is at Maryland Soccer Complex. And one thing that I kind of double highlight this and kind of put 2 exclamation mark, is that the venue capacity of this stadium is only 4,000. Yup, 4,000 people is the maximum capacity of this stadium. That's like almost 4.5 times much smaller than the smallest stadium in MLS, which is Avaya Stadium. And it's quite crazy, but DC United might be playing, after playing in a game where where they were part of the largest attendance in MLS history with last weekend when they play against Atlanta United, which by the way they lost 3-1. They could be going into the next weekend and basically play in the smallest crowd ever in MLS. And I also have heard that this game potentially might not get sold out. And the reason why it might not get sold out is because there is this game is not included in the season ticket package of DC United, and also a lot of people are not willing to get to this stadium because this stadium is nowhere near the DC area. It is way out in the countryside in the suburb of the DC area, and there's just no public transportation at all. So the only way you can get to here is by driving, and yeah, I don't think a lot of people were willing to just do that. And also I heard that they probably will expect only 3,000 people there, which means that if that's the case, then that is the smallest crowd in MLS history. The previous smallest crowd, I think it was a couple of years ago when Chivas USA drew like 3,000 people at StubHub Center, and you probably now know why they are no longer a team of the MLS right now and how they are just defunded because of that. But yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting kind of decision by DC United to play at this ground. But nevertheless, it is a home game for them. They're playing against Houston, and this is an interesting one because I want to say Houston has this one in the bag, but then if you look at what happened with their road record last season, you will know that they look like a complete different team when they're on the road than they are at home. At home, they look absolutely dominant. They look like the best team in the league and probably the best team in the West. But on the road, they look like a team that is like DC United right now, which is very kind of lackluster, and they just could not win on the road at all. I mean, they got some draws and stuff like that last season, and I think they only got like one road win or something like that, but they just cannot win on the road at all. So, it's going to be interesting to see if Houston is going to be finally break that trend. I mean, their first 2 games, even the game they lost against Vancouver, they look very, very good. But the question now is, can they do that on the road? Because that is something that they haven't done throughout the whole season of last year. And for DC United, they definitely want to have a bounce back after didn't do much against Atlanta, and finally they got defeated by Atlanta for the first time. And this is a good opportunity to have this bounce back because you're playing at home, I would say. I mean, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how this one will go. If I had to make a prediction, I still go for Houston to get a win, but I just don't know about Houston's road record and how, they need to change the way that they approach on the road this season, if they can, pick up some points on the road and potentially pick up some victory. Next up, Minnesota versus Chicago Fire. Minnesota actually won their last game. They actually beat Orlando City on the road, which was a very impressive feat. The Fire, of course, lost in a thriller 4-3 against Sporting KC, and that game featured them completely turn the game on its head by scoring 3 goals in 12 minutes, and eventually, after they scored that go-ahead goal, they immediately concede, and then they concede another late goal to lose this game. And for the Fire, it still must hurt the fact that they lost to Sporting KC in that game. I mean, they weren't really, I would say, the better team in that game, but the fact that they looked like they were gonna steal that one. They looked like they were gonna potentially, after when they made that furious comeback, and it just felt like everything was with them, and that they are potentially going to get that 3 points, but it just turns out that, of course, wasn't the case. And as for Minnesota, obviously it's good news that they beat Orlando. The bad news is that this weekend they found out that Kevin Molino torn his ACL. And that is a huge blow to Minnesota. And now Minnesota, really, they're going to have to, once again, heavily rely on Christian Ramirez. And hopefully that Ethan Finley guy can still score goals for them. Because if they can't, then they are doomed. And, for this game, I think Chicago should win this game. Although, I know this game is on the road for Chicago, but from that last game against Sporting KC and the way that they play in the second half, it looked like the way that they play in the second half looked like the Chicago Fire team that was last season. So if they can replicate that performance against Minnesota, they should have no problem in this game. But yeah, so meanwhile, moving on into the next match, the Union take on Columbus. The Union, of course, had a off week last week. They had a bye week, and they obviously won their home opener by beating New England 2-0, while Columbus has won already their first 2 games by beating Montreal 3-2, and that was also another thriller. They literally beat them in the very last minute, and they kind of got lucky with the penalty that Montreal conceded literally in the last minute of the game. And, as much as I want to say that Philly might have a chance in this game, and that, after beating New England, maybe this will be kind of like a little morality, and kind of just a little bit kind of hope that potentially they can do well this season. But I just don't see it right now, because Columbus right now, this team look like they don't miss Justin Merrim one bit, or Ola Kamara one bit. I mean, who would have thought that Jarzy Zardes is looking to try to replicate what he did in 2015, and who would have thought that in the first 3 games, or in the first 2 games, he has scored 3 goals for them. And who also would have thought that Higuain had a pretty bad season last year, is started to score goals for them, and it looked like the same guy from a couple of years ago when the Crew went all the way to the MLS Cup, which they eventually lose to Portland. So yeah, things are definitely clicking for Columbus. They definitely have all the momentum in the world coming into this game, and I don't see how Philly can potentially get past them. I mean, Philly might be happy if they actually drew against Columbus, but Columbus just by far has more impressive player, and they have just the sheer class over Philly, and I really think the Crew should win this one pretty easily. But yeah. Next up, it's the 401 Derby. Next, at least I think that's what it's called. They might call it differently in Canada, but yeah, it's gonna be the Impact against Toronto. This game, of course, will be played at the Olympic Stadium, which is not a surprise because I think they usually play at the Olympic Stadium really early in the season, because Montreal is freezing cold right now in March. And the Olympic Stadium is a dome stadium, by the way. So yeah, that should be a very interesting game. And Toronto, obviously, they made history alongside with the Red Bulls, which I will talk about in a bit. But they made history by beating Tigres on away goal. I mean, they didn't really beat them when they were playing them in Mexico, but they got 2 crucial away goal in that game, and although they lost 3-2, they advanced on away goals. So yeah, definitely that, I'll tell you, that is a huge moment for MLS, and really this game really is just such a defining game for MLS, and how, I didn't really tweet it out, but when I saw Toronto beat Tigres, it was almost like seeing my Quakes beat Tigres, because it just shows that MLS has started to be more competitive, and that MLS is no longer. This game should be a game where really just Liga MX fans will no longer just keep trolling us about how the MLS is always going to be a league that is going to be behind Liga MX, because we have proved that we can finally beat you. But all that CCL talk aside, this game for Toronto, this is going to be a tougher game for Toronto than what people should expect, mainly because this is a derby, which means that Montreal, despite the fact that they are not a very good team and they have lost their first 2 games in the season, they're definitely going to be up for it. And I really think Montreal has been unlucky so far this season. I mean, the last game, that must be painful too. I mean, alongside with maybe Chicago fans have to still trying to get over with that loss last weekend. I think Montreal is still trying to get over the fact that they literally came back from a 2-0 deficit and they conceded a late penalty, a silly penalty that conceded in the 93rd minute. So I think they're definitely going to be up for it. And TFC, yes, obviously they made history, but now the question is that what kind of squad TFC is going to feel in this game. I'm assuming it's probably going to be a weak kind of squad. It won't be like the strongest squad that Greg Vanney is going to feel, because there is just no way in the world you are putting your strongest lineup in this game against Montreal literally 3 days after you travel to Mexico and play Tigres. It's just, if Greg Vanney is doing that, then this is not going to go well for TFC. They are not going. I just, I know that some people will say that, well, you always want to play your first team no matter if it's a midweek game and stuff like that. But TFC, I really think they definitely should just feel maybe their B team, or even just a couple of A's team, and just a couple of guys from the A team and mix with a couple of guys from the B team to play against Montreal, because I just think that with just 3 days rest after making history and just having a very hard fought game against Tigres, I doubt the same team that play against Tigres will be just 100% ready against Montreal. So I'm assuming that TFC is going to play a weaker squad, but I still think they potentially could win this one. Or maybe not. Maybe Montreal can surprise us. And I actually think they could, because Montreal has been, like I said, they've been unlucky. And I think maybe this is the game that things finally go right for them and they can actually beat TFC. But yeah, either way, moving on. This game, NYCFC versus Orlando City. Now, this game was supposed to be a game that, if you were looking at the preseason and which game you're really looking forward to, this probably might be one of them that is circled in your calendar, because NYCFC, we know that they have such a good attacking threat. Don't really need to tell you again, because I already mentioned before. And Orlando City, obviously, they are a pretty much a revamped team with so many signings that they made in the off season, and just pretty much go all in this season and trying to see if they can actually get themselves into the playoffs. But unfortunately for Orlando City, that, of course, those guys that they bought during the off season, pretty much most of them will not be appearing in this game. The only guy that I know that will be appearing for this game and is coming back from suspension for Orlando City is going to be Sasha Kljestan, which is obviously a big piece too. It's Sasha Kljestan should definitely be a guy that kind of stabilize that midfield and really kind of create something for Orlando City. But still, Orlando City still does not have Coleman. They still do not have Russell. They still do not have Dom Dwyer. And now they also don't have Pino, who is the striker that scored that equalizing goal against DC United to rescue them a point. So they have a lot of injury on hands And because of that, this just pretty much is a very simple one to predict, because I really think NYCFC should easily win this one. NYCFC just look absolutely unstoppable right now. They look sort of like the TFC of last season, and also this game is at home too, so NYCFC usually do not lose at Yankee Stadium. So yeah, I expect NYCFC to take care business against Orlando City. And for Orlando City, this is exactly why I said the last game against Minnesota, that is a game you just cannot lose. And it doesn't matter if they have injury or not. You have to win that game, because now you're going to be playing against NYCFC, and you know for sure that that's going to be a big fat L that is going to be hanging, because NYCFC is just absolutely unstoppable right now. But either way, moving on to the next game, Atlanta versus Vancouver. Atlanta got a much-needed win at home against DC United 3-1, and finally kind of break that little curse that they have with DC United. And Vancouver, tell you what, this is a team that is once again flying under the radar of many people. This team has won their first 2 games. I mean, they obviously got a pretty job done kind of win against Montreal, and then they went to Houston last week and they decided to beat them and decided to end their long home win streak, or unbeaten streak, that Houston has had. And yet still many people are not talking about Vancouver and the fact that this team could be a very dangerous team. And for Atlanta, they gotta watch out for this Vancouver team. I mean, the Whitecaps, they are literally, from what are they doing this season, they are literally sort of trying to carbon copy what they did last season, which was they're kind of like flying under the radar. They don't usually play for possession. They usually don't have a lot of chance, but one thing they are very good at is that they are good at counter-attacking, and they are very clinical in front of goal, and they can really blow a big sucker punch to you, and I'm pretty sure Houston find out in that last game. So Atlanta's got to be careful with this one. This is definitely, they shouldn't overlook Vancouver and saying that this should be an easy win for them. Although, having said that, Atlanta United, if they can did what they did in the last game with that front three that featured the likes of Joseph Martinez, Miguel Almiron, and Hector Villar, if those guys are on point, and also the supporting cast with the likes of Julian Gresso, then yeah, this should be a win for Atlanta. But I wouldn't bet the fact that Vancouver could maybe pull off another upset in this game, and that they are going to find ways to beat a team by playing their counter-attacking thing. I mean, you would think that team have already figured out Vancouver by now. The fact that that they're gonna not going to really go into a game and just want to play for possession. They always want to sit back, and they always look for those counter-attacking opportunity, because they have a lot of speedy guys on their team that can literally go on the break in a blink of an eye. But yeah, so far it hasn't been the case. But we'll see what happened with this game. This should be a very interesting one. But yeah, next up, this one I already covered, but I'll just want to talk about it very quickly. Sporting KC is taking on the Quakes. Sporting KC, of course, beat Chicago in the last game. It was a wild game, like I said before. They won 4-3. The Quakes obviously are coming off of a bye week, and they won their first game against Minnesota. And for the Quakes, this is probably the first real test for them. This is really the one that, is it really fool's goals from what we saw in Minnesota, and the fact that the team performed just so well and looked like a complete different Quakes team that I have ever seen in the past year. And is it just fool's goals? And it because they were playing against Minnesota, which was the worst team, or one of the worst team in the league. And if they can perform, if they can do the same thing against Sporting KC, then I'm optimistic that this team can do things in the Western Conference, and maybe they might not even finish. They might not even finish like near like the top 6 or like in the 5th or 6th position as I predict. They might even go for top 4 and maybe get a first round bye. Well, actually, that's a little bit diluted kind of a statement right now. But for Sporting KC, obviously, it was a good win against Chicago, but there are obviously some concern. And the biggest concern right now for Peter Vermeer's team is the defense. That's 5 goals that they have conceded in the last 2 games. And I said this in my match preview of this game, and I said that Sporting KC have not conceded like multiple goals in consecutive game in a while. Well, they also have not conceded multiple goal in 3 consecutive game in a long time too. I think it was like 10 years or something like that. But they just don't concede. Okay, Sporting KC is a very good defensive team, and for the Quakes, they gotta find a way to try to solve that back line of Sporting KC, and we'll see if Sporting KC can once again put up another good offensive displays. The 4 goals that they scored in the last game against Chicago were all scored by midfielders, so it's pretty clear that they're trying to rely on their midfield and their central attacking mid to really get themselves the goal, and we'll see if it continues. But yeah, next up, RSL versus the New York Red Bulls. RSL obviously had a game to forget in the last one. They lost 5-1 in their home opener, and it was an absolute embarrassment. It was so embarrassing that Mike Pecky even openly apologized to the fan and owners about the game. And the Red Bulls were one of the 2 teams joining Toronto FC to the quarterfinal of CCL, and they also make history too by them, of course, beating a Liga MX team, and they also beat their Liga MX team Tijuana pretty comfortably. I mean, they beat them like 3-1, 5-1 overall on aggregates, and yeah, the Red Bulls are certainly. A lot of people didn't give the Red Bulls a lot of chance coming into CCL, and the fact that they didn't think that Jesse Marsch was really going to take it seriously. Well, I bet Jesse Marsch must be thinking about taking this competition a little bit more seriously now, because the Red Bulls, there's a chance that they can potentially get into the final and potentially win the whole competition. I mean, I still think that right now with the team left in CCL, with the likes of Chivas and Club America, the 2 most notable team in Liga MX against TFC and of course them, it's still going to be the Liga MX team that is going to be favored to win this, but hey, why not? Why not the Red Bulls? Maybe they can pull off an upset in the CCL. But going into this game, and actually I'm going to start talking about RSL first, because this is a big game for RSL. And it's even a bigger game for Mike Pecky too, because this is a game that he is facing against his former team. If you guys remember, Mike Pecky used to manage the Red Bulls, and he got sacked in 2014, and this is the first time he is facing his former employees. And we already seen what happened this season, and how in the last week game when Adrian Heath faced against his former employer Orlando City, and he was able to get a win. I hope Mike Pecky took plenty of notes on that game, because this is a chance for him to do the same thing. And for RSL, I'm pretty sure that they will not look like what they did not last season, but the last game against LAFC. There's just no way in the world that their defense is just going to collapse like that. Although they are playing the Red Bulls that also have a pretty fierce attack, so it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to go. But really, this is a big game for RSL. They cannot afford to lose another. They cannot afford to, just after getting embarrassed at home by an expansion team, they cannot afford to drop another game at home against the Red Bulls. And if they do, then they could be in a bit of a serious trouble early in the season, and we might be kind of maybe overrating RSL a little bit. I mean, I've been hearing people say that RSL potentially can win the Western Conference and stuff like that. And the reason why I didn't put them so high up in my prediction video is that this team is still a very young team. It has a very young midfield, a very young defense. And, you know, the only reason why many people put them up so high is because of the run that they had last season, in the second half of the season, where they went on a tremendous run and almost made it to the playoffs. But it looks like that run that they had in the second half of the season, that kind of magic is starting to rub off a little bit. And if they don't beat the Red Bulls in this game, then it's pretty clear that it is started to rub off, and RSL is back to where they were last season, which was off to a slow start. And they definitely cannot afford to do that. But for the Red Bulls, you know, this game, it's going to be interesting to see what Jesse Marsch is going to do in this game, because, you know, it's a short kind of week for them. They had to fly all the way across the other side of the country to play this game. So I'm guessing that they're probably going to feel like maybe their B squad, which is okay, because we know the Red Bulls have a very good kind of B squad team, you know, and it's shown in the last game against the Timbers. So, you know, maybe they can do it again. But yeah, this is a very big game for certainly for RSL, and, you know, maybe for the Red Bulls too. Anyway, moving on to the last game of the week, and I'll try to make this quick because we're now already into the 31st minute mark of this video. But yeah, FC Dallas against Seattle, talking about big games and just teams that really need to win. FC Dallas is a team that really need to win this game against Seattle, because Seattle is coming into this game with numerous injury problems. You know, obviously they lost their midweek CCL game against Chivas, and they pretty much deservedly to go out of CCL. And, you know, it was a bit unfortunate because the fact that, one, they had some injury crisis coming into the game, with Ladero unable to play in that game, and then it just got even worse with the fact that Victor Rodriguez and Chad Marshall both suffer early injury in that game against Chivas. And yeah, I mean, the injury list just continues to grow for the Sounders right now. And for Dallas, they got to take advantage of this, because if they don't take advantage of this, then, you know, you kind of start maybe question the fact that how is Oscar Pereira job status is going to be, because he promised that he, of course, would try to turn this team around and say that that collapse that they had was just one of those things where they just kind of like got into this habit of just losing and just never able to kind of like get it out. And now the new season has started. He of course says that we of course turned the new page, and potentially we're going to make a redemption year. And if they lose or maybe draw this game against the Sounders, and a Sounder team that, you know, is going to be pretty weak, then yeah, this is not looking good for FC Dallas, and that this could be another long season for FC Dallas. And, you know, for FC Dallas, they also had their own injury concern. I mean, they still don't have Kellen Acosta, which he'll be out until like May, and they won't have him until then. But still, they are playing a Seattle team that is just completely banged up. And as for Seattle, you know, I don't really know. Like, I think for the only way I can see Seattle getting a result from this is that if Ladero comes back into this game, and that is still a big if too. There is still a question that whether or not if he's coming back into this game or not. If he's not there for this game against Dallas, then I just don't think Seattle is going to win this, because Ladero is just such a key player for the Sounders. You saw what happened when the Sounders play against Chivas, and how without Ladero, their attack was just non-existent. Like, they did nothing on the attack. There was just nothing there for them. And, you know, I think if they do not have Ladero again, then they could be doing the same thing as they did against Chivas, and hopefully they don't concede a goal and just kind of play defensive and pray that somehow in some way Clint Dempsey can rescue them again. So, I mean, obviously if Seattle loses, that means they are now lost their first 2 games. I mean, I want to say I am a little concerned with the fact that the Sounders have lost their first 2 games, but then again, have we seen this story before? We've seen this story with the Sounders for the last couple of seasons, where they always tends to just get off to a slow start, and then all of a sudden they just turn it up in the second half of the season. And I just have a feeling with the injuries that they have right now, it might be the case again. When they do get back healthy, this should be a very dangerous team again. But really, the overall story for this is that FC Dallas got to take advantage of this. But yeah, that is pretty much my preview and review done and dusted. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of all these games, and make sure you guys leave a prediction of all these games. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.